Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum, dear students. Welcoming you all to your very own YouTube channel, that is English Lounge. Today, the topic of our lecture is to discuss the Matthew Arnold's views about poetry. So let's proceed with the topic.
He was a greatest literary figure emerging from the Victorian era, which resembles Queen Victoria. Well, he started his literary career as a poet, but later on he got attracted to the realm of criticism. So there is a shift. Well, one of his prolific poetical work, which is also my personal favorite, is Dover Beach because of the theme in it. He published his first critical work at the age of 31. That is the preface to the poems. The reason why I personally like Dover Beach, that it is an objection, a revolt to the dogmas that are prevalent in the Victorian era. Let's categorize his criticism. Well, first of all, we will broadly classify his literary criticism into two categories. One is theoretical criticism and other is practical criticism. Theoretical criticism depicts theories and practical criticism depicts the practical aspect of his criticism. Now, we will find some of the glimpse of his theoretical criticism in the preface to the poem that was published in 1853. In terms of practical criticism, we see the estimates of English and continental poets. He has criticized the English and continental poets in his practical criticism. Well, as we all know that every one of us has or have to gain certain influence in order to be succeed in our life. Our life is a reflection of certain influence. In the same way, Matthew Arnold's life is also, his literary work is also the reflection of few personalities. First of all, he was a follower of his father's dogma because his father was an ardent supporter of classical precept, and he also inculcated the love of classicism in his son. Classicism corresponds to ancient Greco-Roman standards of the literature. The second powerful influence was the age in that shows the environment in which he was living compels him to create criticism and create his piece of work. Thirdly, he was a learned man, both in ancient and modern precept. It means that he was a very knowledgeable person. He knows each and every aspect, and this knowledge also influenced his work and influenced his personality as well. We'll now see a brief synopsis of his prolific work, The Study of Poetry. And the number one aspect is that he says that the poetry has a bright future, and according to Plato, he was also a supporter of ideas, and he says that ideas matter a lot in poetry. Well, unconscious poetry is the strongest part of our religion, means that he is comparing religion with poetry. Well, we should read poetry more and more. Why should we read poetry more and more? Because it will interpret life. Here he is discussing the didactic part of the poetry, and then afterward he said that poetry consoles us, means poetry gives us pleasure. High skills, high craftsmanship is required for the higher function. There should be no fakeness in the poetical work. He was strictly against this. Usually high standard is required for higher function of the poetry. There should be no irrelevancy in poetical work. Well, his definition of poetry is very much interesting, and it invokes a lot of criticism among literary circles. Well, his definition is poetry is a criticism of life under condition fixed for that criticism by laws of poetic truth and beauty. He says that poetry is a criticism of life, means that it is a reflection of life, and it is bound by the laws of poetic truth and beauty. Well, he is also a supporter of poetic truth and beauty, also correspond to the aesthetic sense of Matthew Arnold. One of the best poetry is capable of performing such functions. Now, in order to choose the best poetry, readers were warned against the fallacious judgment. He not only tells what is best poetry, but he is also guiding the readers that how they can judge that which piece of literature is best for them. And he also discusses few estimates like historic estimates. Historic estimate will affect us when we are dealing with ancient poets like Chaucer, and personal estimate affects us while dealing with contemporary poets. You can have many examples of. Readers should have to pay consideration to real estimate. Here he is against the previous estimate. He is saying that the reader should have to pay closer attention to only real estimate. Then the question arises that what is real estimate? Well, the real estimate is the recognition or discovery of the high quality that is used to produce poetry. I think it's so simple. It should be a real classic and not false classic. Then if afterwards he says that real estimate is based upon classicism, the classic dogmas. A true classic is a one which belongs to very best, and such poetry we feel and enjoy. Well, one of the famous concepts of Matthew Arnold is concept of Touchstone that places him at high pedestal among the previous and contemporary critic. Now question arises that what is this? Well, it is a methodology which is used to test the worth of poem and any literary work. These methods will help the critic to evaluate the quality of the poetic work. And Matthew Arnold further says that excellence of poetry both lies in the matter and substance and also in manner and style. Well, matter corresponds to the thing, the issue that you are discussing in the poetry, and manner and style correspond to the way you are discussing your issue. Now, we'll see the extension of Touchstone, but we can say that matter and style are far more worldly phenomena. Here he is compressing things that only matter and style are important. Matter, what you discuss, what is your theme, and style, the way you present is more important. If, for example, the matter is based upon truth, then manner and diction would also be proceeds towards superiority. In his work, he has given reviews of some poets. In order to give practical shape to his concept, he not only discusses the concept, he rather give practical example. He gave a brief view of some literary figure. For example, first of all, he discusses Chaucer. He says that so Chaucer's work has freedom, shrewdness, and largeness. It means that he is praising Chaucer's poetical caliber. His approach is truly humanistic. That shows that he is focusing towards humanism. For example, if we study the Chaucer's characters in Canterbury Tales, the Prioress, the Wife of Bath, we will also see an humanistic aspects of their life. Here he is discussing about that. But he further criticized that his poetry is not serious like the poetry of Milton, because he is not the epitome of the classical dogmas. Then what he said about Shakespeare and Milton is that both of them are poetical classics of their age, whereas Dryden and Pope are not. Here he is criticizing Dryden and Pope. While praising Shakespeare, he says that in England there needs a miracle of genius like Shakespeare to produce a balance of mind. Well, it is a very simple line that he is using adjective like genius, and furthermore he is using striking words like miracle to praise a famous literary figure of Elizabethan age, Shakespeare. What was his opinion about Gray? He is one of the most unique figure of the age of Pope and Dryden. He is also considered to be a poetic classic. Well, he lived under the company of great classics of that time, and his work and his personality and his contribution to the literature is also a striking reflection of classical dogmas. Now, one of the most important aspects I am going to discuss, that what is genuine poetry. Arnold also gives a difference between genuine poetry and poetry of Dryden and Pope. His attitude toward Dryden and Pope is very much harsh. Here he is saying that their poetry is conceived and composed in their wits. Genuine poetry is conceived in soul. As we already know that poetry is the product of soul. It arises from your soul. It arises from inner side. It is, as Wordsworth says, that it is the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. So feelings are basically the soul. So here he is saying that genuine poetry is conceived in soul. Proceed towards conclusion of our presentation and critical evaluation. After the practical manifestation, he also claimed that good literature will never lose its significance. Well, he is saying here that a good literature is universal and it appeals to the people, the population of every era, every age. Furthermore, nowhere in his argument we find any biased attitude. We didn't find any biasness whether he is discussing poetry. We only see an objective analysis and approach while discussing this essay. Work has aroused a lot of controversies among the literary figures. Then why the controversies arise? Well, in terms of the scope of the poetry, the controversies arise, and some critics also objected to his definition of the poetry.
So, if you have any query or question, you can reach to us at our official email or WhatsApp number. Thank you very much.